Good morning. Let's get started here. Well, thank you. So last week we started on the visions of Zechariah, including some Christian artwork that depicts the visions. We looked at three visions last week. The third of which was pretty simple, which was a vision that showed Jews from all over coming back to Jerusalem. And it was an encouragement to come back and work on rebuilding the temple and the walls. And today we're going to spend all of our time on one vision. It's probably the most interesting to us because it's the only vision out of the 8 that is a messianic vision about Jesus Christ. And it touches on themes of salvation that the others don't. But Zechariah, we noted, was one of the 3 prophets, the last 3 prophets that are listed in your Old Testament. Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi were the latest. They're at the end for a reason, actually. They were the last prophets. They were the ones after Jews had already started returning to Jerusalem from what was then the Persian Empire, having conquered the Babylonian Empire. At the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, when the Persians were allowing the Jews to come back and rebuild. And Haggai and Malachi included quite a bit of rebuke in their prophecies because people weren't prioritizing getting to work. And there was a 16-year period from about 536 to 520 BC, and you can read about it in Ezra and Nehemiah, in which the people in Jerusalem got afraid because there were people around them who didn't want the walls rebuilt and the temple rebuilt and so on. And they stopped. For 16 years, they stopped working. And so 3 prophets were sent. Haggai and Malachi were in the tough love category, telling them, get back to work. You're not serious enough about your faith. Zechariah was given 8 visions, and most of Zechariah is intended to be more along the lines of encouragement, hope for the future. And this messianic vision is one example. So we see, and I've underlined some words here in this passage that have messianic implications that we're going to talk about. Then he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, reading from Zechariah 3, starting in verse 1, with Satan standing at his right side to accuse him. The Lord said to Satan, "The Lord rebuke you, Satan. May the Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Isn't this man a burning stick snatched from the fire?" So that's probably a reference to the burning stick snatched from the fire. It's probably a reference to being rescued from exile. Now Joshua was dressed with filthy clothes as he stood before the angel. And if we look back, or if we look forward at some artwork here that shows the high priest Joshua standing there in filthy clothes. And frankly, if you look at the Hebrew that's translated filthy clothes, it means his clothes have manure all over them. Really filthy. Okay, so this is the vision that he's been given. So he spoke to those standing before him, "Take off his filthy clothes." And then he said to him, "See, I have removed your guilt from you, and I will clothe you with splendid robes." So the interpretation of the filthy clothes is pretty much given to us. It represents guilt of sin. And taking off those filthy clothes and being given new clothes would therefore represent the forgiveness of sin. Then I said, let them put a clean turban on his head. So a clean turban was placed on his head, and they clothed him in garments while the angel of the Lord was standing nearby. Now, this is the second time in this vision that the angel of the Lord has been referenced. And we mentioned last week that I believe that there's lots of times where the word angel is used in the Old Testament. An angel appeared. But there's a limited number of times where it says the angel of the Lord appeared. And when that happens, we believe that it's a manifestation, a visible manifestation of the Son, the second figure of the Trinity. That it's it's in a sense either a vision or an actual incarnation of the Son, because, and we mentioned last week, the way people speak when it's the angel of the Lord is as if they are talking to God. When an angel appears to one of the judges or prophets, if that person falls down before the angel to worship him, the angel says, get up. Don't worship me. Worship God. I'm just an angel. I'm just a messenger from him. But when it's the angel of the Lord, there are passages where someone falls down in awe and they are not corrected. And so this is a messianic part of the vision, the angel of the Lord. Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. That's the language of Satan as accuser. Happens a couple of other times in the Bible, most prominently in the book of Job, right, where Satan is the accuser. Now, notice in the passage that we just read, the first part of this, I have removed your guilt. That's a reference to messianic salvation. Then they give him the clean garments. And then it says, then the angel of the Lord charged Joshua, the high priest, this is what the Lord of hosts says, if you walk in my ways and keep my instructions, you will both rule my house and take care of my courts. I will also grant you access among these who are standing here. That's a kind of a mysterious phrase, I will grant you access. In the vision, there are other regular angels, you might say. And he's saying to Joshua, part of salvation is you'll be given some special access to the angels, which means a special access to heaven, or to the presence of God. And that's one of the things that salvation brings us, is it brings us back into the company of God. More artwork of, now, it's these Christian artists, why would Joshua, who's the high priest, be shown listening to the angel, and they both have angel wings? I'm not sure why the high priest has angel wings just like the angel, but anyway, that's what was often done. Now, these last few verses are pretty rich with messianic references. Listen, Joshua the high priest, you and your colleagues sitting before you, indeed, these men are a sign that I'm about to bring my servant, the branch. Notice the stone I have set before Joshua. On that one stone are 7 eyes. I will engrave an inscription on it, the declaration of the Lord of hosts, and I will take away the guilt of this land in a single day. On that day, each of you will invite his neighbor to sit under his vine and fig tree. This is the declaration of the Lord of hosts. And the vision is. Now you see I have a lot of things underlined. One of them is the word sign. That occurs quite a bit in the Old Testament for wonders or miracles, something that is supposed to grab your attention. This is actually the only time it appears in the book of Zechariah, even though he's got 14 chapters and 8 visions and so on. Then I will underline my servant. And we'll see some Old Testament references, but many messianic passages in the Old Testament referred to the coming Messiah as the servant. He was the king, he was the new high priest, he was a prophet as greater than Moses, and he was a servant. And in particular in Isaiah 53, which we often read with respect to the prophecy of the crucifixion of Christ, he's called the suffering servant. But he's also called here the branch. That's messianic language. It refers to your descent, like on the family tree, and it's used of the Messiah as being a branch off of David. He's a descendant of David. We'll see these Old Testament references on the next slide in just a minute. And then it says, notice the stone I have set before you. There are messianic references that we're about to see in which the Messiah is the new cornerstone of the new temple. And of course, I underline, I will take away the guilt of this people, of this land, in a single day. Now, what does that refer to in a messianic passage? What the day of the crucifixion, right? I mean, the taking away the guilt of the land in a single day. So let's look at these. First, let's look at some Old Testament language references. As I said, the sign is only used here once, but it's used in a lot of places. For example, all the miracles that are before Moses and that Moses does before the Pharaoh are called signs with this same word. My servant is messianic language from Isaiah. And I think it indicates, amongst other things, that Zechariah was familiar with Isaiah, that when he interprets this language into text from the vision, that he's very much aware of Isaiah's language. There are 4 messianic passages in Isaiah that focus on Messiah as servant, in addition to lots of other messianic passages in Isaiah that talk about priest and king and so on. And so those 4 passages in Isaiah are called the 4 servant songs of Isaiah. And of course, the most well-known, Isaiah, the end of 52 and all through chapter 53, he was pierced for our transgressions. He was lifted up for our iniquities. It's a direct crucifixion prophecy, among other things, right? And we sometimes read that at the communion table. That's the suffering servant song out of the 4 servant songs. So servant might not jump out at you as a messianic term unless you're familiar with the rest of the Old Testament messianic passages. Now, if we look at Isaiah and Jeremiah, we will see that the Messiah is referred to as the branch. We'll take a look at that last reference first in Jeremiah 33. Verses 14 and 15, God, speaking through Jeremiah, is renewing the covenant with David and says, look, the days are coming. This is the Lord's declaration, when I will fulfill the good promises that I have spoken concerning the house of Israel and the house of Judah. In those days and at that time I will cause a branch of righteousness to sprout up for David, and he will administer justice and righteousness in the land. And continuing the next verse, in those days Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will dwell securely, and this is what she will be named: the Lord is our righteousness. So the branch of David, also referred to there as the branch of righteousness, is an example, one of these examples from Isaiah and Jeremiah, in which in clearly messianic passages, the Messiah is referred to as the branch. Sometimes the branch of David, sometimes the branch of Jesse, David's father, occurs in the Old Testament language. So then we have this reference to the stone, which it says the stone has 7 eyes on it. Now, interpreters have tried to wonder, what does 7 eyes mean? What is this, God watching over them? What exactly does the stone mean? But we do know that stone is something that is used of the Messiah. Isaiah, and then we'll look at this famous Psalms passage which Jesus himself quotes. Isaiah 28, verse 16. Therefore the Lord God said, look, I have laid a stone in Zion, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. The one who believes will be unshakable. A familiar passage quoted by New Testament writers. And then in the 118th Psalm, we have some language that's familiar to us because Jesus Christ quoted it and applied this messianic language to himself. Verse 22 and 23. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This came from the Lord. It is wonderful in our eyes. So this is one of the messianic passages in which the Messiah is referred to as a stone, but it also gives a hint of how the Messiah will be received, right? What does it say? The stone that the builders rejected, something that's rejected has become glorified now. Something rejected has become now the chief cornerstone of the building. And so the Jews should have been wondering about this. Why will the Messiah be rejected? Aren't we all looking forward to the Messiah? Why does it say the Messiah will come and he'll be rejected? And yet, then he'll be exalted. And when I taught a few years ago about messianic prophecy, one of the points I made was not that every messianic prophecy is so clear and detailed that everybody knew exactly what was going to happen. There would be questions in the minds of a Jewish believer. What does this mean? How's this going to happen? But when someone comes who fulfills the prophecies about the Messiah, when someone comes and teaches the way Jesus teaches and performs the miracles that he performs, they should be open then to having him explain an understanding of these passages that might have been a little mysterious to them. They should be open to learning something new from the one who performs the miracles. It's not that everybody before the time of Christ would be perfectly straight on exactly how it's going to happen when the Messiah comes. But there are these hints. The suffering servant passage in Isaiah 53 indicates that Messiah is going to come and be killed. The builders are going to reject the stone that represents the Messiah. There is some rejection involved. So as the Jews saw their own leaders rejecting Jesus, they should be open to the idea that, hey, this is another fulfillment. This is another way in which Jesus fulfills messianic prophecy. Jesus quotes verbatim in Matthew 21 this passage. The stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. The New Testament not only has some direct quotes from Zechariah and from the messianic passages, but more subtle allusions where only a phrase is picked up. In Jude chapter 9, the language that we got out of this vision, Joshua the high priest is standing there in filthy rags, Satan is standing there as his accuser, and is told by the angel of the Lord will rebuke you. And they use the Greek, from the Greek Old Testament, of the same language in Jude verse 9, in this mysterious verse that says, yet Michael the archangel, when he was disputing with the devil in a debate about Moses' body, did not dare bring an abusive condemnation against him, but said, the Lord rebuke you. The context is Jude is, leaves certain accusations up to the Lord. And he cites this from a non-biblical book, an apocryphal book, this incident of Michael disputing with the devil over Moses' body. That's not in the Bible, but it's an apocryphal book that would have been familiar to Jude's audience. And the language is directly taken from Zechariah chapter 3, the Lord rebuke you. Later in Jude, he says he encourages you that you could save others by snatching them from the fire. Well, we just had that language that the angel of the Lord rebuked Satan, the accuser, by declaring that Joshua was a stick that was snatched from the fire, meaning someone taken out of captivity, rescued by God. Therefore, who are you, Satan, to accuse him when God himself has rescued him? This seems to be in another allusion in Jude. And then in Revelation, where certain visions mirror certain Old Testament visions, we have the verse that says, then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah have now come, because the accuser of our brothers has been thrown out, the one who accuses them before our God day and night. That can only refer to either Job or Zechariah, or both, in the mind of John. So this is, I mentioned that whether by allusion or direct quotation, Zechariah is the densest collection of New Testament references in the whole Old Testament. Something about Zechariah from the fourth vision, which is this messianic vision, to the second half of the book, which is not visions but is prophecy, and most of it messianic, caught the minds of the New Testament writers. So, anyway, thank you. Do you have any questions or comments? Or